Hey YouTube, we are up to day number 24. What did I just sign? V4, 24 of the 31 Days of Tarot Challenge hosted by Ethany. As always, I've got the link in the description below if you want to see the prompts, and you can search the hashtag to see what folks are saying about this question. And the light is really bad right now. Sorry about that. So for day number 24, our prompt is, what tarot card do you feel is most misunderstood and why? All right, so I have to hold myself back on this one because I feel like I can do about 10 different cards. And I feel like in some ways I might just end up regurgitating what Lindsay Mack has to say about some of these cards, because she is honestly my favorite teacher of this year and probably beyond. I think she does a really good job of kind of like in her big tarot course, which is being reoffered, I think in April. She does a really good job of kind of talking about cards where there's a big difference between the societal interpretation of the card, like what society wants you to think the card is about versus what the card is actually about. And so I would refer you to her podcast, to her courses, if you're interested in learning more. But I'm going to pick, I can't do just one, but I'm going to pick two. I'm going to pick two majors in particular that I think are often misunderstood, and not just misunderstood by non-tarot people. So for example, like I think the death card, right, is misunderstood by almost everybody who doesn't do tarot. But it's very quick to get from that, assumption about the death card to the actual meaning of the card. I want to talk a little bit about the devil card, and I'm going to talk about the emperor. I think I have other videos on, I believe, where I talk about both of these cards, so I'll link them in the end screen if you want to know more about my thoughts on these. But I want to start with the devil, which has been a really great teacher for me. I feel like I'm like leveling up with the devil. I'm digging in 2019 into a new layer. I feel like I was working with one layer of the devil pretty intensely in 2018, and then in 2019 I feel like I'm going to keep going with that. Partly because I'm doing a lot of ego release work, and there is a lot of connection between the devil and working with ego and ego release, or ego questioning, or whatever you want to call it. The devil is a really strong teacher there. But also I feel like this is a very liberatory card that gets read as a controlling card, a card that is about addiction, which it can be, but in a different way. So I will reference Lindsay's podcast episode because it was really recent and really good on the devil. I believe it was in December, the Wild Soul Tarot podcast. She did talk about the devil and sort of the brain cycles that the devil can be about, and the way that when you're leveling up spiritually, your ego is going to want to pull you back down and puts you into thought cycles around whatever it is. So it might be that the addiction, like an addiction or something like that, is the like grabbing point or the anchor for your ego in the devil card. But it's not, the point of the devil isn't just saying like addiction is bad, drinking is bad, or eating is bad. For me, it's emotional eating. It's like eating when I'm bored. I'm very like health at every size. I don't feel that eating is a negative behavior in any way. I feel it is useful and necessary for our survival, and that we shouldn't judge others for what they eat. But personally, like my relationship with food, and I'm not going to get too into this, by the way, so if you are triggered around this kind of stuff, I won't go into detail, but just to say that my relationship to food involves some of this devil energy, and it really makes sense to me that it is like the ego's train, that it just wants a hamster wheel, that it just wants to keep going around and around, and that it's not the act of eating something that isn't good for my body and my health and the health conditions I have. It's not the act of doing it, but it's the brain saying, now you're bad because you did that, and I'm going to berate you, and then it's going to become this whole emotional cycle. So that is one layer of the devil card. And then another layer that I think is really interesting, I really actually, if anybody has any recommendations, please do leave a comment. Any books about the figure of the devil and like how the devil came to be the devil in like Christianity or other traditions, because I've heard some really interesting things about how like Lucifer means like light bringer or something, and the original idea of the devil was actually like liberatory, and then it turned into this whole sin, evil Christianity thing. But I love the idea of the devil as a liberator, of the devil not necessarily as being the figure that like he's chaining the two people, but the chains are loose, right? The whole thing about that, like Rider-Waite-Smith imagery is that the chains are loose and people can get out. But I also see the devil as an actual helping figure, like that it's like another level up from the strength card. It's like facing fear and facing the things that control you and the ego and all of that can actually bring you to a next level. And I will link in the end screen. There's a video, I talked a little bit about this in the context of like queerness and the character of the devil, in terms of like queerness and sort of other like sexualities and things that are looked down on by society, in talking about the first vertical line of the majors. So I will link that, because I think it was an interesting little sort of thought experiment. So yeah, I think the devil is also often misunderstood as sort of a surface layer thing, and there's a lot more there. And then the other card I will mention is the Emperor, and the reason I think the Emperor is misunderstood, so I find that most people I know dislike the Emperor, and most people I know are queer, or trans, and/or trans, and/or women, and/or, you know, the patriarchal idea of the Emperor is what's, you know, does not sit well. Totally understand that, but I think it's really funny because when I first met the Emperor card, I was like, oh my god, me. Like, I relate to this card a lot. I feel really strong and good in this card, because for me, the Emperor is about, like, the Emperor, I guess, in his most exalted state, there is a shadow side, but like the Emperor is actually can be about healthy control and healthy like structure and organization and like groundedness, sturdiness, like building a foundation. I mean, that foundation is going to get wiped away in the Tower card, I get it, but like I think is an interesting starting point. Like, it, you know, the Emperor comes early in the major arcana, but I think it is like it's important for me. I really related to that card. Lindsay also talks about the redwoods, like the idea of the Emperor in nature as being like these big trees that don't apologize for taking up space. And I really like that because like I think it's like setting a foundation. It's almost the moment before, it's like the period before you start to have imposter syndrome and question your right to take up space and build a structure, and before you get into all the like deeper spiritual work where you might blow that structure down. It's like early agency. It's when you first start to feel like you have a right to take up space, you have a right to be here. It could be like your first like job where you feel really competent, or it could be your first like an experience that you have where you are a leader or you're in control, or you just like you feel good in your own shoes. There are other cards that speak to that, but I think the Emperor is one of them, where, you know, hopefully we don't all get this, but like in an ideal world we would all get a chance to like take space and plant our roots before we're challenged, which we should be challenged as well. But yeah, so I think like seeing the Emperor as just being about like patriarchy and negative things, and when the card comes up being like, oh god, it's the Emperor again, like you know, some jackass is going to come into my life. Like, no, I think it's an invitation to look at places where you have foundations, where you have structure, where you can be strong, where you can root, where you can prepare by building. So that's my interpretation of the card. I would love to hear what you think about these two cards or other cards. I'll be reading all of your, or watching rather, all of your videos on the topic. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. I'll be doing a video a day in January, and I always do about a video a month on tarot topics. along with other stuff on my channel. So please do subscribe, and I hope to see you back here soon.